Most people think food production requires sunlight. Large gardens, open fields, long rows of vegetables stretching across the property. That idea feels so normal now that most people never question it. But hidden underneath forests, fallen logs, damp wood chips, and shaded corners of the world is an entirely different food system that humanity depended on for thousands of years. Mushrooms, quiet, strange, often overlooked, and one of the most fascinating foods a backyard can produce. Because mushrooms completely change the way you think about growing food. They do not need bright sunlight. Many thrive in places where traditional crops struggle. Some grow directly from waste materials like logs, straw, cardboard, or wood chips. Others quietly return year after year with surprisingly little effort once established. Unlike many modern food systems, mushrooms feel deeply connected to natural cycles. Decay becoming growth, dead wood becoming food, shade becoming abundance. There is something ancient about it. Modern life pushed people away from slower systems, but mushrooms remind us that nature is still constantly producing food quietly in the background if we learn how to work with it instead of against it. So in this video, we are exploring the forgotten food that grows in the shade. These are some of the best mushrooms for backyard self-reliance, food forests, low-maintenance growing, and long-term resilience. And stay until the end because one of the final mushrooms on this list can grow directly in garden paths while improving the soil at the same time. Let's start with one of the easiest mushrooms for beginners, oyster mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms almost feel unreal the first time you grow them. A damp bag of straw or sawdust suddenly erupts with massive clusters of soft gray mushrooms that look more like ocean shells than food. And the incredible part is how aggressively they grow. Oyster mushrooms are famous for colonizing material quickly and producing heavy harvests in surprisingly small spaces. They can grow on straw, coffee grounds, cardboard, hardwood pellets, logs, and other waste materials many people normally throw away. That matters enormously for self-reliance. Systems become powerful when they transform waste into food. Another reason oyster mushrooms are so valuable is speed. Some setups produce harvests within only a few weeks. That quick turnaround makes mushrooms feel very different from fruit trees or long-term garden systems. Nutritionally, oyster mushrooms provide protein, fiber, minerals, and important compounds modern science continues studying closely. Part of what makes oyster mushrooms so fascinating is the atmosphere around them. Mist, humidity, dark corners, quiet growth happening almost invisibly. Growing mushrooms feels less like traditional gardening and more like managing a hidden ecosystem. Shiitake mushrooms. Few mushrooms feel more timeless than shiitake. For centuries, people cultivated shiitake on hardwood logs throughout Asia, creating systems that quietly produced food year after year from shaded forest environments. Freshly cut logs stacked carefully beneath trees, rain moving through the forest, mushrooms slowly emerging from bark after storms. The entire system feels calm and intentional. Shiitake also store extremely well when dried. That long shelf life becomes incredibly valuable for self-reliance because preservation matters just as much as production. A productive food system should not only create harvests, it should create stability. Dried shiitake mushrooms can remain useful for months while adding deep flavor and nutrition to meals during colder seasons. Another major advantage is longevity. Properly inoculated logs can continue producing mushrooms for years. One setup can quietly provide recurring harvests with surprisingly little ongoing work. Lion's mane. Lion's mane may be one of the strangest-looking foods most people will ever grow. Large white cascading formations hanging from logs like frozen waterfalls or soft fur. The first time most people see it, They are not even sure it is real. Beyond appearance, lion's mane became incredibly popular because of growing interest in its potential neurological and cognitive benefits. Modern research continues exploring compounds connected to nerve growth and brain health, which helped turn lion's mane into one of the most talked about mushrooms in the world. Visually, it fits perfectly into the atmosphere of shaded food systems. Quiet forests, cool humidity, logs slowly producing strange living structures that almost look alien. Lion's mane also represents something important about resilient gardens. Strong food systems should include different food types serving different purposes. Calories matter, storage matters, nutrition matters too. And mushrooms bring something unique to food production that traditional gardens often lack. Wine cap mushrooms. This is where mushrooms start becoming almost magical. Wine cap mushrooms can grow directly in wood chips spread through garden pathways, around raised beds, and beneath perennial systems. Food can literally grow where people normally walk. And while growing there, the mushrooms also help break down organic material and improve the soil underneath. That changes how you think about gardens entirely. The pathways themselves become productive. The mulch becomes food. The decomposition process becomes part of the system instead of waste. Wine caps are also surprisingly beginner-friendly. They spread aggressively through fresh wood chips and often return naturally once established. Another major advantage is scale. A few bags of wood chips can suddenly become pounds of edible mushrooms after rainy periods. There is something deeply satisfying about harvesting food from areas most people never even consider productive. Reishi mushrooms. Reishi mushrooms feel ancient. Dark red shelf-like structures growing slowly from hardwood logs with an appearance somewhere between wood and lacquered stone. Historically, reishi became deeply associated with longevity, wellness, and traditional medicine throughout Asia for centuries. Even today, reishi remains one of the most recognizable medicinal mushrooms in the world. Unlike oyster or shiitake mushrooms, reishi is usually not grown primarily as a culinary mushroom. Instead, people commonly dry it for teas, powders, extracts, and long simmered preparations. Reishi represents something important beyond food itself. A shift in how people think about gardens. Not only calories, not only vegetables, but ecosystems supporting long-term wellness too. Visually, few mushrooms fit this slow documentary atmosphere better than reishi. Moody forests, dark wood, rain, slow cinematic growth. The atmosphere almost creates itself. Chicken of the woods. Chicken of the woods may have one of the greatest names in all of mushroom growing. Bright orange shelves erupting from trees like glowing fire. And the reason for the name becomes obvious once cooked. Many people compare the texture to chicken, which makes this mushroom especially interesting for people exploring alternative protein sources from natural systems. Now foraging always requires extreme caution and proper identification. That matters enormously. But chicken of the woods represents something fascinating about mushrooms overall. Nature quietly produces huge amounts of food most modern people never even notice. Entire ecosystems are constantly recycling nutrients into edible life forms hidden in forests, fallen trees, and shaded spaces. Most people look at fallen wood and see waste. Mushrooms see opportunity. Turkey tail. Turkey tail mushrooms are everywhere once you learn to recognize them. Thin, colorful layers spreading across fallen wood in forests around the world. Historically, turkey tail became strongly associated with traditional medicinal systems because of compounds connected to immune support and gut health. Modern research continues studying these mushrooms extensively, especially around immune function. Turkey tail also changes your perspective. Mushrooms remind people that not every useful organism looks dramatic or impressive. Some of the most beneficial systems in nature operate quietly in the background, almost invisibly, breaking down dead material, cycling nutrients, supporting soil life, strengthening ecosystems underneath the surface. Modern life disconnected many people from those slower natural processes. Mushrooms reconnect people to them again. Morels. Few wild foods feel more legendary than morels. Every spring, people quietly disappear into forests searching for them with almost obsessive dedication. And once you taste fresh morels, it becomes easier to understand why. Deep, earthy flavor, short seasonal abundance, an almost mythical atmosphere surrounding the hunt itself. Morels also represent something larger: patience, observation, seasonality, the understanding that nature does not produce everything on command. Some foods arrive briefly and disappear again. That temporary abundance makes them feel even more valuable. Mushroom culture as a whole teaches people to slow down and pay attention again. Weather patterns, moisture, shade, temperature, decay, the systems most people ignore suddenly become important. Now here is the important part most beginners miss. Mushrooms are not plants. Trying to force them into normal gardening logic often creates frustration. Mushrooms thrive through moisture, decomposition, shade, airflow, and patience. They want completely different conditions than tomatoes or peppers. And once people understand that, everything changes. Suddenly shaded corners become useful. Fallen logs become productive. Wood chips become future harvests. The entire property starts feeling more alive and interconnected. Nature wastes almost nothing. Dead trees become soil. Soil feeds forests. Forests feed fungi. Fungi feed ecosystems. Humans can become part of those cycles again instead of constantly fighting against them. The good news is that you do not need a giant forest to begin. Start small. One oyster mushroom bucket, one shiitake log, one shaded corner with wine cap mushrooms. Learn moisture, learn airflow, learn patience. Because mushroom growing rewards observation more than intensity. Over time, these systems become surprisingly resilient. Logs producing food after rainstorms. Garden paths quietly generating mushrooms beneath wood chips. Forest corners turning into hidden harvest spaces. The property itself begins functioning differently. Less decorative, more productive, more alive. Maybe that is why mushrooms feel so powerful right now. Modern life became loud, fast, and artificial, but mushrooms belong to slower systems, older systems, systems humans depended on long before industrial agriculture existed, and perhaps that is the real reason people are becoming fascinated by them again. Not only because mushrooms grow food, but because they remind us that life continues quietly beneath the surface whether we notice it or not. So next time you walk past a damp, shaded corner of your yard, look at it differently. It may not be empty space at all. It might just be waiting for the right kind of life to grow there. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.